All right. Well, we're glad to have you with us again. We got a couple of folks online. So, I'm honored to have Matt here. So Matt will be introducing himself, but I've actually known Matt for a long time. Actually went to grade school together. His mom was my fourth grade teacher. As he will, I'm sure, tell, we are both diehard Bronco fans. Now he lives in Waconia, like I said, I'll share all that stuff. So Matt is just a great asset for us and for the church as a whole. So today's going to be talking about, again, connected with our sermon for today, our series on that topic of stewardship. And again, he has just a plethora of resources. So again, we have this being recorded. This will be available online. And of course, we have access to Matt working through the district. Great resource for us as individuals, as families, but also as a congregation. So I'm simply going to turn things over to Matt, and the floor is yours.
All right. Yeah, well, thank you, Pastor. Do I have this close enough to my mouth that you can hear okay? And I hope everybody online can hear all right as well. This may be surprising or not, but even with everything that's been going on in the last 18 months and the use of things like Zoom and everything else, it's my first time to do a presentation streaming online. So hopefully this goes okay and things come across all right to you who are listening. So let's see, I'll start with this, a little bit introduction, a little bit more of that. And I generally don't, at least out loud in public, I don't want to correct a pastor. But I will just specify. I'm employed by the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod Foundation, LCMS Foundation. There is a Lutheran Foundation. It's a separate foundation. I won't say anything bad about them, but just to make that clarification, so there's no confusion going forward. You're not the only one who has done that. Oftentimes I'm introduced as somebody from LCEF. So, again, a good organization, but different. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Hey, at least I didn't say you're from Lutheran Brotherhood.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Or AAL.
Yeah. That'd be out of date. Yes, I work for the LCMS Foundation, and the way that's structured, my title is Gift Planning Counselor, and there are about 18 of us now at this point. I think we just hired the 18th recently, and we're deployed at various parts of the country. And in order to help have that funded appropriately, we partner with different LCMS ministries in the territories where we're located. So currently here, my main partnership is with Concordia University in St. Paul. So most of my work is done out of their advancement office, directly working with alumni and donors of the university. But I am still here available to come and do these kinds of things, be available to support our congregations and other LCMS ministries around Minnesota, to bring this information of Christian estate planning to you, the church members, and then to support our congregations and ministries with things like endowment investing and long-term funding for ministry. A little bit more about myself by introducing my family. As Pastor already mentioned, Bronco fans, and you can see that in the picture up there.
Oh, yes.
Oh, thumbs up.
Broncos and Vikings. Vikings first and then Broncos.
Okay, well, we'll take a second place vote. And my wife, Bethany, would be the tallest in that picture over there on the left. She teaches third grade at Trinity in Waconia. And Casey, on her right shoulder, is in sixth grade there. Raylan, down to her left, is actually in Bethany's class this year. She's in third grade. Both of us graduated from Concordia Seward, and I was a Lutheran school teacher as well for a while. Our first call was out to Salt Lake City, Utah. And I don't know if anybody is familiar with that. There aren't as many Lutheran churches there as there are here. Okay, so like we have Lutheran churches around here similar to Starbucks, one on every corner. It's not so there, but it was a great place to get started. And we started our family there. In 2010, we moved to Colorado Springs. I got started with Thrivent. All the Lutheran schools, unfortunately, had closed in Colorado Springs by that point. As you heard, also growing up in Denver, when I was a kid, we had Lutheran grade schools all up and down the Front Range of Colorado. And going to Bethlehem Lutheran in Lakewood, Colorado, we'd go down there and play tournaments and things like that. Like I said, unfortunately, they all closed. We moved back to Salt Lake City. I did another 4 years with Thrivent, but having grown up with a mom as a Lutheran school teacher, growing up attending Lutheran schools, my family for generations being in Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, it was heavy on my heart seeing our Lutheran ministries in financial trouble, and especially our Lutheran grade schools. And with my passion for teaching and supporting Lutheran organizations, as well as the new financial background that I received in my years with Thrivent, and being able to work one-on-one with individuals, I was praying about getting back to work for the church in some capacity. And the Lord showed me this position up here in Minnesota with the LCMS Foundation. And so we moved up here 6 years ago. And we live in Mayer, Minnesota, so just past Waconia a little bit. I already kind of talked about the foundation a little bit, but just a little more. We are under this umbrella of Synod, so similar to some of the other organizations that you probably have heard about before. The Extension Fund, Plan Services, Concordia Publishing House. Foundation exists under this umbrella of Synod, not controlled by Synod necessarily, but sharing those same values and beliefs. So when we go out to work with LCMS members and our ministries, you know that we share those, that understanding of our LCMS doctrine. Excuse me while I take some water. The allergies, as we're getting into the fall, are really affecting my voice. So. But as we were hearing about some more in church today, talking about this overall topic of stewardship, that's really where an estate plan also fits in. Those of you who've been in the LCMS all your lives, this wouldn't be the first Sunday that you've heard about the topic of stewardship. We do a great job in our church body of explaining stewardship, and we come at it from the basis of some things that you, again, were reminded of today. God is the owner of all things, and as stewards, we are managing that on his behalf to be used for our needs, to be shared with others, and to be a blessing to our ministries and our community. So it's with that mindset that we frame this idea of your estate plan, how that can be used, and to be the idea that if we're practicing good stewardship all during our life and making the best effort to be good stewards of all of that, we have one last step in that. And as managers of those resources, it's putting a plan in place for how will that be used and where will it go when we go to heaven, so that we don't manage it all of our life and then we're gone, and with this notion of, okay, well, that'll all get taken care of somehow. So we get to do that during our life as, again, stewards, and talking about putting the plans on paper for how does that get taken care of by whoever manages that after us. We, instead of talking about an estate plan, a lot of times for some people that conjures up bad images, or maybe, talking about just a will or a trust. So we like to talk about it as your lifetime plan for giving. So this for you could include having a will or a trust done. It could include some different ways for how you support the church and other ministries that you care about during your life. But all these things are part of that lifetime plan. Whether you need them or not is different for your individual situation. But I'll touch on these things as we go through today. So one of the things with our estate plan, again, as I said, is most people know what a will is and the general idea of what it does. But I like to take a minute to kind of go over the formal phrase of that. Most of the time we shorten it to a will, but it's your last will and testament. And so if you think about the definition of the word testament, it's in this second one here, an expression of conviction, also tangible proof of what your beliefs are. So your will can actually do that, whether you realize it or not. In who are you leaving those things that God has given to you? Who are you leaving those things to afterward? Who are you supporting with those? As well as having a statement of faith to go along with your will. Because certainly our faith is a gift from God as well. And that's one of the blessings that we receive from him. And so we can leave that behind too for people. We get to do that during our life as well, and how we share our faith with others, and the example that we leave to the people that we have an impact on. But we can also have a statement of our faith included in your will and transfer that on, that faith on to those who are in your family, somebody who see your will, or people that come to the service. But your statement of faith is meant to be what you see here. It's the statement of your faith. It could be included in your will as a part of the will. It could be printed off and put in the bulletin at the funeral service. But it's personalized to you, and it's what you want to leave behind, the statement that you want to make to your family and loved ones, your friends and neighbors, about the faith that you have. It could be reassurances to your family. It could be words of comfort to them. This last one here, maybe not all of us have to think about that, but we may face the reality that there are people in our family who at some point in their life may have wandered away from the faith. We don't know where they'll be at that point that we go to heaven. But if we can leave a last message to them about that, the Holy Spirit can use that to strengthen their faith, or maybe even bring them back to that if they've wandered away. I didn't mention a couple of things that are in your folders. Those of you online, apologize, you don't have a folder, but we'll leave some extras here if you'd like to come and pick those up at some point. But on the left-hand side, the first sheet, this is a form that as we go through this morning, you can fill out if there's particular topics that I cover that you'd like me to follow up with you on to discuss. This is an easy way for you to fill that out, and you can put the follow-up in my hands to be staying in touch with you to talk to you about those things. If you'd rather not, you're welcome to reach out to me afterward. But one of the boxes there should mention giving you some ideas or some templates or examples of statements of faith. If you'd like that, you can note that and I can email to you or send it to you or whatever. But then as we go along today, if there's other topics I cover that you'd like to discuss further, you could fill that out and leave it afterward. So this is a real life example of a statement of faith. This is my grandma, Leela Fern Curry. This is my mom's grandma. And Grandma Curry had the advantage of one of her sons-in-law is a counterpart of mine. My uncle Jim is a gift planning counselor in Iowa District West. And when Grandma was redoing her estate plan shortly before she died, she updated her statement of faith, and she used one of these templates that we have available at the foundation. And as I showed here, she had it printed up and put in the funeral bulletin. She also had it in the little sheet that was left at the funeral home for the visit. And I'm blessed to get to read it every time I do one of these presentations. I don't know if all my cousins do that or not, but I know they have it. And in the 6th paragraph, it says, I thank the Lord for my grandchildren, Erica, Micah, Matthew, Katrina, Sarah, Trey, Tanner, Jessica, Nathan, Lucas, Timothy, Mindy, Adam, Ashley, and Colton. May the Holy Spirit guide you along the narrow path of salvation through faith in Jesus Christ as your Savior. I love you and give you my blessing. I look forward to eternity with you in heaven. In Christ's love, Leela Curry, Mom, Grandma, Great-Grandma Curry. And I love reading this and hearing from my grandma. I love that she had that message about seeing us again, because it is comforting. And I know that I have some cousins who aren't very active in their faith. So I hope that they still have access to this. And I do regularly remind the family about it. But like I said, a great last little note message to leave to your family. So even if you are a person, I've heard this before, who is absolutely dead set planning on, you will have distributed all of the rest of the money God has entrusted to you before you go to heaven in some way, shape, or form, whether that's in retirement or by giving it away, you can still leave this faith behind and a message of your faith. And so if you'd like some help with some of these templates or samples, I'm happy to provide those. But then again, in your estate plan and this lifetime plan for giving, transferring your faith, but there may be some things left over too. And then this is your opportunity to plan for what ministries will you leave those behind to, and what family members or other people. And so there's different ways of transferring those material blessings. One of the ways is through the will and the trust. If you haven't thought about this yet or aren't sure the places that could end up receiving finances and possessions after you've gone to heaven, there's 3 potential places where those could go to. And I like to phrase it like this: they can go to the people that you love, if you plan for that. They can go to the ministries that you love, if you plan for that. Or they could go to the local or federal governments that you may or may not love, whether you plan for that or not. And that's going to happen in some different ways. One of those is through taxation. So improperly forming how and where everything will go could cause some taxation after your death. It could also be that if you have no plan at all, no designations, and then the local court gets to decide where is everything going to go. And they're not going to take into account the fact that somebody says, Mary loved going to St. John in Woodbury and she supported them all the, every week and gave gifts there. Or she loved her grandchild in Iowa. They won't take that into account. They'll go based on the law. And if you have close family, spouse, kids that they can trace, they'll go through that and put it out that way. But it's not going to get especially to the ministries and charities that you want to support, and it may not get to the other family members down the line. So rather than putting it in the hand of the courts or possibly having too much of it eroded to taxes, you can properly plan it out now to make sure most efficiently it gets to who and where you want everything to go. Part of my help in that is that in sitting down and going through this process, you can get ready for that first meeting, walking into the attorney's office. Normally how that goes is if you're not sure of what you want to do, you sit down and talk to them. The first consultation is free, and they will start asking you all these questions that maybe you haven't thought about yet. Like, do you have somebody in mind that you want to be in charge of settling all these assets out and making sure things go where they want to go? If you have some other people that you want to benefit, some minors who may be under 18 at that point, they're going to ask about how should that be structured? Do you want it to go to their guardians or what have you? So they'll be asking you all these things that maybe you haven't thought about yet. And if you'd like to think about all of that ahead of time and walk in with confidence to the attorney's office, especially, no offense if there's any attorneys in here or listening, that's oftentimes nerve-wracking for a lot of people. That's not an office that's really easy to go walk into. So if you want to have that plan ready to go ahead of time, we can talk through that, and you can go to them ready for them to just give you the advice about, is just a will appropriate? Do you need a living trust as well? What other documents? So we can map that out. And then provide some attorneys, help you find one if you don't have one in mind, and then go with you on that first visit as well and subsequent visits to help explain to them why it is that you care so much about leaving a gift to St. John instead of just giving it all to family, or explaining the rest of the plan and how you came to that point. Maybe you have already done some of this though. You have a will in place, you have the estate plan, and you're thinking, well, everything's pretty good. A couple of things to think about with that. Your will won't necessarily transfer all of those financial accounts, real estate by itself. A lot of those financial accounts have beneficiary designations on them. So do the designations match what you want, where you want things to go? So here's some typical examples. So oftentimes there are either widows or widowers or divorced people who may have that deceased spouse or divorced spouse still listed on those beneficiary forms. Sometimes it's a life insurance policy that mom and dad bought years ago, and they're still listed as the beneficiaries. So maybe now the family that you might have or somebody else is not listed there. I'll show you an example in a little bit too of how to make sure this coordinates with the will, but reviewing your beneficiary designations. Also, you might have power of attorney form and maybe not a will. The power of attorney forms are how you designate a person that you trust to make financial decisions for you and healthcare decisions and have access to your health records if you become incapacitated during life. But a misconception of that is that your power of attorney, when you die, will be able to execute your estate and settle your estate. But power of attorney forms, the person who has the authority in those, that power ceases as soon as you have died. And so that person will not be in charge of settling your estate. They will not have access to your bank accounts, your financial things, and any of the rest of that needs to be done. So just having power of attorney forms alone will not plan all of those things out for you. You still need a will as well to designate a person to be able to settle out your estate and carry out those wishes. And then check in there too, again, with all these plans. Maybe several years ago, you belonged to a different church and they were listed as a beneficiary of somewhere in there, but unfortunately that church is maybe closed now. So updating all of your charitable intent. And just like before, if reviewing this plan needs a visit to the attorney again, I'm available to go along and help you explain that. So here's the one real life example of where reviewing this comes into play. So this was a couple that I had met with, and they said, we do have a will, we have beneficiary designations, but if you're offering to help us look through this and there's no cost for that, why don't we sit down and look at it? So I said, great. We sat down, they brought out all their documents, and I said, what is your goal? They said, we want 10% of all of the estate that's left over after the second of us has passed away to go to these ministries that we've designated. And we want the rest to go to our kids. So that's easy enough. That's a very common setup and easy to make happen. What they had done in thinking that that plan was set in place is that they told their attorney that when they had their will done, that to put 10% in their estate to go to these ministries. The attorney did that. What they hadn't done is taken the next step to make sure that all of their beneficiary designations also included that 10%. So their house, and these are made up numbers, but they're nice round numbers to make a good example. Their house was roughly a fourth of what their overall estate was. And the house didn't have any designation of where it would go. So when the second of them passed away, the house would go into the estate and would be distributed via the will. All of the rest of their estate were things like IRAs, bank accounts, life insurance, which had beneficiary designations attached to them. And those companies that administer those accounts are going to send the balance to all of the people named on there, which was their 3 kids. So when they thought that if they had $1 million estate, they were going to send 10% or $100,000 to bless these ministries and further the Lord's work, in actuality, if this plan came true, it was going to be 25,000. Still a great blessing to ministry, but not their plan. They wanted 10% of all of the estate to go. So what we had to do, which was an easy fix, is when I showed them that, I said, all that you need to do is update your beneficiaries to say that 10% of those accounts go to this block of ministries that you want to support. So that when they pass away, the house goes into the will, it gets sold, 10% of that goes to the ministry, and 10% of all of the accounts go to those ministries as well. Yeah.
Can you remind me on retirement accounts, are you allowed to put an entity or does it have to be an individual?
Absolutely. And that's a great question. And I'll mention a little bit of that later. Your church and any other charity that you want to leave a gift to in your estate plan is better to make sure that your 401k, IRA, the gifts to those places come from those accounts instead of anything else, because those places won't pay the tax on the IRA, but your kids will, or family will pay the tax on those. Okay, so then the result of that, again, all they had to do, they didn't have to go to the attorney. They put the will back in the safe. All they had to do is contact their financial companies and update their beneficiaries. Now their plan is going to be carried out, and they felt great after that, knowing that what they intended to do, this plan that God had put on their heart to support these ministries, was going to be carried out. So speaking of supporting ministry in your estate plan, I don't have the answer that you need for this, but I'm just curious, do you have a certain reason why you may want to include one of your favorite ministries in your estate plan? If anybody wants to share, I won't make you.
I think, it's, for me, it's the knowledge that I could take care of myself during my lifetime, but knowing that if there's anything left over, and then there's that check fund, but we're stupid to have it go where it needs to go.
Yeah, thank you. Yep, yeah, and so your own reason for why you want to support the ministries that you may support through your estate plan is personal to you. So I'm not here to tell you why you need to do that. These are some of the reasons why people would do it. Certainly, as we heard about, a reason for stewardship this morning is in response to God's love for us and what He has shown us. And so we respond by supporting ministry during our life, and we could do that after life if we want to as well. One thing I like to mention is, because this isn't something that just comes to everybody's mind right away, is many of us give that offering weekly or monthly, whatever your regular pattern is for that, but we're giving during our life, typically on that regular basis, to our church and other ministries. And the day that we go to heaven, that support stops coming in to those places. And actually, it can take a congregation up to 7 years to replace the offering that was coming in from a regular member who had passed away. So one of the things that you could consider is setting up your plan in a way where a chunk of money is left over from your estate. And it could continue to give that offering to your church or to support those ministries that you support, even while you're in heaven. And they could continue to receive those gifts from those blessings that God has given you. But whatever your reason is, like I said, this is personal to you. Oh, yeah.
I just have one quick question. I kind of understand that in order to do this and do this, given money from your total estate, you have to sell your home?
So let's say you own the home when you pass away, and then does the home have to be sold? Is that what you're
In
asking?
order to be able to get like 10% of it to something, you have to go to a sale.
Yeah, so either the personal representative would, or the home itself could be left to the specific ministry that you want to support. And then it would be sold from there. If you had plans for that home to be used for something else or for a family member, then the gifts that you want to leave to any ministries you want to support would have to come from some financial account, if you have that. But yeah. And if you want to talk more specifically, if that's a question about your situation, I'm happy to also talk either over the phone or in person after, if you want.
I did a transfer of deed upon death.
Sure,
It
yeah.
was $46. You did, okay.
Oh, yeah. Yep, yeah, the transfer on death deed is really like a beneficiary designation for your house and for real estate. So you can set it up ahead of time to file, so it says that at your death, your ownership of the real estate transfers automatically to the person or place named on that deed. And then it doesn't have to go through the estate, doesn't get probated or anything like that. So that's one way to deal with that. And then I may not need to tell you this, but the kind of places that you may support through these gifts in your will are the places that you already give to during your life. So certainly church here, it could be local ministries, Camp Omega, could be CSP, could be national like LWML, Lutheran Hour. I didn't look ahead to see the support that the church has for Mission Central, but it could be Mission Central as well, listed in these plans. So it's just the places that you already support today are the same that you can support through these gifts in your will. And the process of doing that is pretty simple. It's just taking a look at of what would make up the estate, what would be left over at that time that I pass away. Some of it you may want to designate to family if you have some. And then what's that percentage that would go to the ministries? Sometimes people ask me, well, I don't even know how I would divide that up. What are some ideas? And some of the common ones are thinking about what's your current percentage of giving during your life that you use. Are you a 10%er, a 25%? So how do you come up with the giving that you do during life? You could divide your estate in the same way. Another thing that I see a lot of times is they'll take the church and just that group of ministries together that they want to support and think of that as another family member. So if you have 3 kids, name the church as your 4th kid and split up the estate 4 ways. So there's really any number of ways of doing that. And again, that's personal to you and what's your desire to accomplish with that. And I've already mentioned a lot of these in one way, shape, or form. It could be having that listed in your will. It could be the beneficiary designations of those various accounts that you have. What we do like to caution people to consider, if you already have a will in place and you've named either a person or an entity as a beneficiary of a specific amount of money. So say you have St. John listed for $50,000 of what's left of your estate. Well, what happens if your estate isn't big enough to accomplish that at the time of your death? Or if that gift goes, but you also really wanted to support some family members in a certain way, and by giving that amount away first, there's not enough to accomplish what you wanted to do for the family. So thinking in terms of percents of gifts in your will helps that to flex as your estate size changes over time. And then, so here's another example of a person that I worked with. And in her plan, again, she had the 2 kids. She wanted to leave some of that estate to them, and she wanted to include her church. She didn't really want, she liked that idea, but she kind of thought, you know, if I leave a certain amount to the church, then that's less for what my kids may receive. I think they could actually, this could really bless them financially. They could need this money at that time. So how can we balance that out and make that efficient? And this is an example of the estate size. So 250,000 of real estate or cash accounts, things that aren't going to be taxed to her beneficiaries, and 500,000 of IRAs, which again is 100% taxable to everybody except for nonprofits. At some point, there are rules for that, which we can talk about later. So the idea for her was to use something called a charitable trust. And I'll briefly explain that in a little bit, but it's not quite as scary as thinking about what we often do with trusts, like living trusts can get quite complicated. But it's a great, efficient tool for doing this. So the trust would inherit a portion of the estate that she wanted to designate for her kids, and it pays income out every year for a certain number of years to her kids. Meanwhile, it's being managed and invested, so the original amount that went in there can be preserved to go to her favorite ministries after it's done paying income to her kids. And then she said, well, but I don't want my church and these other places to wait to receive a gift from my estate until after this trust is done. So let's leave a gift up front from the estate to them as well. So we talked about a couple of different things, and what she decided to do was, well, let's make sure right away off the bat, 10% of the estate goes to my church. Let's leave the rest of any of the assets that my kids won't have to pay tax on to them, so they can receive that and not lose anything for taxes. And everything that's taxable, let's go ahead and put in this trust, so there's no big tax bill up front. The way this charitable trust was set up, and sorry if you're not a math person, I'll show you in picture form in just a little bit how this works. So 5% of the account every year for 20 years goes out to the kids. 5% of 500,000 is 25,000. If you take that and multiply that times 20, 5% times 20 years every year adds up to 100% of the amount that went in there goes to her kids. So the kids inherit the 500,000 over a 20-year period. So she's not taking away from them. She's allowing as much as possible to go to the kids. They're still going to pay tax on those IRAs, but it's over a 20-year period. So it's spread out more. And because the 500,000 was invested away, that the 5% income the trust was earning goes out. The original 500,000 that went in there was still there after 20 years. So she's also leaving a gift to her church of 500,000 at the end of that time. Some of you may be lost by all of that I just said, those numbers. If you want to ask me some more about that, go ahead and fill out on that form or reach out to me later and we can talk more slowly about that. This trust is oftentimes called a give it twice trust because of that way that the original amount that goes in can be paid in smaller bits over time to family, so given to them once over time, but preserved in a way that it's still there to also go to ministry at the end of that time period. So it's sometimes nicknamed a give it twice trust. And just in general terms, again, it works like this. You have the estate, some of it goes immediately to the people and places where you want it to. Another percent of it, in this case, goes to the LCMS Foundation for us to manage that charitable trust. We don't have to, there's other places that do that. The trust pays income to the family again over a term of years. At the end of that term of years, there's a remainder amount left over in the trust, and that will go to the ministries that you want to support.
Yeah, can you just touch real quickly on if you have and the entity is no longer there that you designated for, what happens? Is it
Yep.
spread out between the remaining entities?
Yeah, great question. So the question, and I should have repeated other questions for those online in case you can't hear. The question was, what happens if the entity you named to receive the remainder of the trust is no longer existing at the time that the trust pays that out? The answer is you get to decide up front the plan that you want for that. So you can name some backup places. You could say, if this place that I named is no longer in existence, then I want it to go to this other one. Or you could say, I want it to go to the district to spread it around within the district. Or the default language, at least in the trust that we manage at the foundation, is that the foundation decides where is another place it could go that closely matches the one you had originally suggested. Yeah, but you get to decide that right off the bat. If you put one of these trusts in place that's going to be funded at your death, it's completely revocable and changeable as long as you're still alive. And if you haven't put any money in it yet. As soon as it gets funded and it's paying income to those income recipients, it becomes irrevocable from the standpoint of you can't change that, but you could still change what the beneficiaries are. So these are very flexible to fit a number of different solutions, and you have a lot of options to set it up. You could even structure it to say, these people I named to receive the income over those years, if one of them passes away, or let's say if we named kids and there's another kid, or grandkids and there's another grandchild, then that could also be included to add those other people in down the road. But again, if this is something that kind of sounds like maybe it fits my situation, maybe not, but let's talk about it some more. By all means, again, anything you put on that form that you want me to reach out to you on, it's no obligation to continue to work with that. I am here as a resource funded by CSP on behalf of the foundation to provide this help to you and be a resource. So, so I want to try to close up pretty soon in case people are going to be going to the second service or we need to get setting up for that. But the Charitable Trust is one way that's a great alternative given the changes in the Secure Act that came about last year. If you don't know, the IRAs used to have a rule where if a non-spouse inherited an IRA, they were allowed to disperse from it over the rest of their lifetime. So that worked okay for kids, because if your kids inherited some of your IRA, they wouldn't have to take it out all in one lump sum and pay the tax on it in that year. They get to spread it out for the rest of their lifetime. But the Secure Act came and changed that and said, no, you know what? We really do have a lot of national debt. And so we need to start getting this tax money pretty quick. So now the IRAs have a 10-year rule. So except for a spouse or a disabled beneficiary, and there's a couple other exceptions, but in general, any non-spouse or disabled beneficiary has to take out all of the IRA in 10 years. So as an example, let's just say a child of yours receives some of your IRA that's equivalent to $250,000. Maybe you're sitting there going, that's way more than mine. Maybe you're going, okay, this is hitting home. But when they take those amounts out from year to year, it's adding to the income that they already have. Most people who receive an inheritance currently, the average age is in their 40s and 50s. Those people are still working, oftentimes in some of their highest earning years. And if they have to receive money out of these IRAs and include it in their already taxable income, it could push them up into higher tax brackets. Your child may be giving away a third of this account that you stewarded it to leave behind to bless them and other ministries. They may be giving away a third of it to taxes. So using the IRAs in different ways or putting it into a vehicle that can spread it out to them over a period of time could help on that tax efficiency, could help it be there to bless them more and the ministries that you want to support. Again, those can also be funded during life, and this is also a tax issue. So assets that you have, real estate, stocks, securities, you can't put IRAs during your life into a trust. That's another rule, but other things like that, if you recognize that if you sell that property and you're going to pay tax on the gain, you can put that into a trust and again, spread out the charitable trust, and you can spread out that taxation. There's other ways of giving assets that are appreciated that you can completely avoid the tax and receive a charitable deduction for it. But with all this planning, we want it to be a way that you can set up now to bless your family and these ministries with these gifts when you've gone to heaven, instead of become a burden to them. Help you plan for issues that may be in your family that need proper planning, like a beneficiary who's receiving special needs support, special Social Security. I just forgot the term of it, but
SSDI.
yes, thank you. SSDI. If you have somebody that can't receive too much more in income because it interrupt that care, there's planning that needs to go into that as well. And then, as I mentioned, and I should move this up a little bit closer in the presentation so I have time and I'm not flying through it. But your lifetime plan for giving includes ways for you to also give beyond writing a check into the offering plate. The Lord may have blessed you with certain assets to manage that could be great gifts for your church, but you recognize again that it might be a tax burden to me if I have to sell that in order to make that gift. So there's a lot of different ways that you can give from those kinds of assets that are taxable to you in a tax efficient way. One of the ways for that is down here at the bottom. If you are somebody who's now at the age where you have to take money out of your IRA, you know that when you make that withdrawal, you're going to report it as income. That amount of income could affect what your Medicare taxes are and could play in also with the Social Security picture. So you can tell that financial institution to send that money directly to the church or ministry that you want to support. They get to receive that. You didn't have to report it as income, and it might lower that amount of tax that you're paying on that. Now, it doesn't count as a charitable deduction. So if you're still in a position tax-wise that you are using charitable deductions, that needs to come from your checking account. But that's one way of doing that. And as I mentioned before, stocks that you have that you understand, if you sell those, there's some gain on those and some tax. You can give those directly to ministry without paying the tax. You could even put those into an account that'll turn around and pay you income from it and spread out the tax, and then also create a taxable gift at some point down the road. So my part in this is that, as I mentioned before, I'm here to help walk you through this whole process. There's no cost for you for that. It is confidential. If you just have a question for me, there's no obligation to continue to work with me on that. If you already have some other advisors that you can carry out these plans with, I can just give you ideas to take with them. But I'm here to encourage you through this process, encourage you to pray about it, that God would have his will done through these plans. I don't take the place of the bottom part of this list. I'm not the attorney. I used to have my license in financial advising, but I'm not going to give you financial investment advice or tax advice. I can give you general tax tips. But the rest of your planning also needs to take into account these other advisors, and certainly keeping your family members in the loop on that as much as you want to as well. So the encouragement in there is not to be like the couple from the Baby Blues comic strip who were sitting on the couch and the husband says, "Wanda, I think we need to think about updating our wills." She says, "You're probably right." And they sit there And he says, there, we thought about it. That's a start. If you need some help to move through this process, fill out the form. Let me be responsible for reaching out to you. Even if you tell me, no, now's not a good time, but I can put it on my list to continue to follow up with you and help nudge you through the process. If you're just not ready and you don't want to talk now, but you think maybe down the road, keep my card, which is in the folder, and reach out to me when you're ready as well. The last thing I'll mention, and again, for our online folks, you can pick these up from the church. This is a resource from the foundation. I didn't put it in all of the folders just because it's so big and not everybody wants it. So to be a good manager of these resources, you can take one if you want to. Half of it talks about some things about this kind of planning, like what should we consider if we have minor children who might be a beneficiary? What are some other tax-friendly tips, ways to include ministry? And then there's a portion of it that ultimately we would use if you want to sit down with me on this process, where you can organize your estate by listing out who are the people that would be involved in this, what are the assets that make up your estate, so that we can talk about how is each one treated differently, and the other goals that you have. So whether you want to use this for yourself or do want to use it in our planning, feel free to take this as a resource to you. But in closing, thank you for having me here. Thank you for being online. And as I said, reach out with any more help that you need, because that's what I'm here for. So thank you.
Thank you.
So again, a huge thank you to Matt for being here. You know, there's so much good stuff. Even like I know some of us here, I have no plans of going to heaven anytime soon. But the reality is you never know. Plus, again, just that's part of being that faithful steward. So Matt, the LCMS Foundation, not the Lutheran Foundation, the LCMS Foundation, incredible resource. So hopefully contact him. You know, again, that they're here to serve us. We're going to utilize them. We're putting together a funeral guide. I think we're going to put that part of the funeral guide to help people out, just planning to bless. And one thing that just last thing really quick, just struck me is, again, the way you can set up to be blessing. I mean, 20 years after you're gone, you know, to still be blessing the ministries that were so impactful to you. It's just an incredible thing to do. To think, you know, I could be gone for two decades and still God is using the resources to be a blessing to advance the kingdom. So let me say a prayer to close us out, and then we'll head up to the next thing. So Lord, we thank you for today. I thank you so much for Matt, all the work of the LCMS Foundation. Lord, all that you give to us, you entrust to our care. So Lord, help us to be wise and faithful stewards, to glorify you, to spread your kingdom, and to bless those in our lives and beyond. So Lord, bless us, walk with us, guide us, and again, allow the Holy Spirit to guide and direct every part of our lives. We pray all this in the name of Jesus. Amen. All right. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
And it goes without saying, if you got questions, Matt will be willing to stick around. I volunteer.
Mhm.
I gotta